You're listening to the Public Health Entrepreneurs Podcast with your host, Dr. Charlotte Huntley. Welcome to Public Health Entrepreneurs, the podcast for visionary leaders who are ready to transform public health and healthcare through innovation. I'm your host, Dr. Charlotte Huntley, and as a public health entrepreneur with over 25 years of experience in both healthcare and public health, I understand the unique challenges and opportunities that come with bridging multiple disciplines. On this episode of the podcast, now usually it's just me sharing with you tips and strategies for your business, but occasionally I do bring on a guest to share their insights and strategies with you. I am excited for you to meet our guest on this episode, where she generously shares about how to legally protect your business. I'm so excited. I went to her and I just asked her if she would come on the podcast and just share a little bit. And I really felt like it was something that my audience needed to hear, just based on what questions I've been receiving and conversations that I see around the industry and how we're growing as public health, a niche group of public health entrepreneurs. So she graciously said yes and has generously shared, as you're about to find out. She is truly a valuable resource, and I've personally worked with her for a couple of years now. And not only do I trust her as a lawyer, but I adore her as a person. She genuinely cares about helping small business owners. There is something for everyone at every stage of business on this episode. So I encourage you to take notes and to also follow up with her after listening to this episode to explore her resources, many of those that we talk about throughout our conversation, and also how she might be able to help you with your business as well. You can easily find the links to connect with her on the show notes page for this episode, which is episode 106, and you can find that at publichealthentrepreneurs.com. We will also provide the link to the show notes in the description for this episode. So if you're listening in one of the podcast apps, just look at the description for this episode and you'll find the links to directly take you to the show notes page and find all the links that we discussed during our conversation. So let me formally introduce her to you now, and then I'll connect our conversation. Andrea Sager is an author and the CEO and founder of Legalpreneur, which is a legal tech startup that focuses on helping small businesses cover their assets and get lawyered up. She is also ranked number 22 out of 40,000 trademark attorneys in the United States. Let me just say that part again. She is ranked number 22 out of 40,000 trademark attorneys in the United States. We do talk about that on this episode. In addition to running her companies, Andrea is a semi-professional poker player, regularly playing on live stream cash games and traveling for poker tournaments. Now, in 2024, Andrea reached her first final table at the World Series of Poker and placed 9th out of over 1,200 entries in the Ladies' Championship. This is such an awesome fun fact about her that I was hoping to discuss on this episode. However, we got so caught up in the content that we both forgot about it until after the recording ended. I still wanted to share it with you all the same. She's just a fantastic person all the way around. Now, let's connect my conversation with Andrea.
Hi, Andrea. How are you?
Hi, I'm great. I'm so glad we're finally able to make this happen.
I know. Me too. We've been talking about it for a while and then schedules didn't quite work out, but it is so good to see you. And I so appreciate you taking some time to join me on this podcast and just answer some questions and chat for a bit. Before we go too far, we're a little more laid back on this podcast. I know you and I have talked quite a bit. We've known each other for a while too, but let's just start with introductions. Why don't you tell everyone who you are and a little bit about yourself?
Yeah, so I'm Andrea Sager. I have Andrea Sager Law, which is my law firm, and I have Legalpreneur, which is our legal tech company, essentially legal resources for entrepreneurs, because my goal is to reach as many entrepreneurs as possible, no matter where they are. So if you're not able to quite be at the point of working one-on-one with an attorney, you can absolutely still get all the legal protection that you need with Legalpreneur. And how I got started, well, I started in big law. I started with what I thought was my dream job, absolutely got, the job, the highest paying job in the city that I was in, thought I was set for life. and very, very quickly realized, oh gosh, this is not for me. And that was a hard realization, which I've had many since then. But I think we all have these defining moments in our lives. And it's these moments where we're like, never again. We are not staying here. We are meant to be doing something else. We are meant to be on a different path. And that happened to me when I was at the big firm. So I first had another small business that I started in law school that I had sold before starting at the big firm. And because of that first business, I had a connection to a lot of small businesses. And I'm very fortunate. I don't consider that business like a huge success by any means as far as money. However, it taught me a lot. I created a network from there. And that's honestly how I was able to bring in, or I had clients wanting to come work with me at the big firm. And the firm essentially, a partner told me to my face on this day, it was actually exactly 7 years ago. It was February or March 2018. And he said, small businesses are not quality clients. We do not want them. And that was it for me because I saw a need. I saw all of these small business owners that needed an attorney and they didn't have anybody to go to. And this was during what they called the retail apocalypse, where the malls were dying, they were shutting down like crazy. But my first business was a clothing boutique. It was a clothing store. And so I had all these boutiques as clients. And so I saw a different story. I didn't see retail dying. I saw retail shifting. And it was shifting to mom and pop shops. And so I knew, hey, there's a huge need in the market. Somebody has to go serve them. Why not me? And so I was planning my exit. I was planning my exit from the firm. My husband at the time, I am now divorced. My husband at the time did not want me to leave the firm because granted, I was making a lot of money and I totally understand, but I believed in myself and I knew I would make it work. However, I always say that I manifested getting fired because I did. And I got fired. I got this huge windfall. They paid me a severance and it was beautiful. And in my eyes, that was the greatest day of my life because I wanted to go out on my own. I did not have the courage to make that leap. And so the universe said, hey, we're pushing you out and we're going to go ahead and give you some money. And so literally that night, I launched my law firm. I had my first client. It was another boutique owner. And that was nearly 7 years ago. And it has been quite the roller coaster ride, quite the self journey ride. And it's just been so beautiful that I've been able to support so many entrepreneurs over the past 7 years. And I remember one day I was sitting in my office and it was, I mean, if you've seen Suits, it was very much that posh looking, beautiful from the outside looking in. I was on the 38th floor. It was just absolutely beautiful. Like, it really was a dream, but I was miserable. And I remember sitting in my office one day, sitting and thinking, I was like, oh, that would be so cool if I could be this go-to attorney for online entrepreneurs. And a couple of years ago, I was sitting in my house in the living room and I just had this moment and I was like, oh my gosh, I am that go-to attorney for online business owners. And so I've been so grateful for the work that I've been able to do and that I have done. And so I'm really excited to just continue doing what I'm doing and continue to serve the small businesses that otherwise wouldn't be able to work with an attorney.
Oh my gosh, I absolutely love that story. And I didn't know that many details. I knew only like a little bit of that story. I absolutely love that I mean, on so many levels. I think that sometimes, I think everyone's listening, I think we can find a little bit of ourselves in that story.
Mm-hmm.
We have, like you said, those defining moments. And I think that it's
Mm-hmm.
really, I can relate to that tension because I remember feeling that way. And when you work and get your degree and you kind of like in this sort of corner, this like niche area, and then
Mm-hmm.
you don't, I'd already eliminated government because I left government. I went to private industry and I was like worked my way into this really, air quotes, good job.
Yes.
But I knew that there was more. I knew I was designed to serve in a very different way. And it was really scary. So taking that step and like you said, believing in yourself and just all the things at that moment when you know you're supposed to do something different, it's like, do you do that or do you kind of stay here? And thank you for sharing that because I know that that will resonate with so many people. I remember when I first met you and it was at a conference and I remember thinking because I had already decided I needed a lawyer. I was like ready to I've been following someone else because I wanted someone because I am, kind of a remote business. My clients, I'm in South Carolina, but my clients are everywhere else. So my clients are in Alaska and Washington State. And so I really wanted someone that understood all the nuances of online business and consulting and that could be like that. I wanted that resourceful. I wanted everything that legalpreneur represented, but I've been following someone else, and there was the only other person I knew that kind of had that. So when I met you at a conference, I thought, "Ooh, wait a minute! There's somebody else is doing this." So tell us a little bit more about kind of your transition into legalpreneur and like how did you get that started and kind of what were your thought process and how did that come together?
Yeah, so very quickly, and it's so funny that you talk about the conference because that is still one of our favorite ways to connect with clients because being an online business owner, it can be very lonely.
Right.
You're in your little bubble at home. I have to force myself to get out of the house sometimes to go to the grocery store
Right.
instead of ordering groceries because even though it's so much easier and convenient, it's like, wait, I got to get out of the house at some point.
Right.
And so conferences, same thing. It's like I get to mingle and mix and mingle with people. So I love conferences and we love conferences to this day. But so I started the law firm May, May 2018, and very quickly knew that I wanted to scale and grow. And I started within the law firm, the Legalpreneur membership. And this is basically it was our membership to get all access to your own attorney. And it has shifted so much throughout the years. And ultimately now there's a version of it that does have an attorney client relationship within the law firm. But now within Legalpreneur, we have it set up as a membership where it gets you all of the resources that you need, all of the legal protection that you need at one low monthly price. And basically, we set up your LLC. You can get your trademarks done. You get all of our contract templates. We do your business audit. We basically everything that you need in one membership, and you actually don't have to hire an attorney for it. And that's what I've always been a proponent of is, hey, there are times that you likely will need a lawyer. But when starting your business, when setting everything up, you don't necessarily need a lawyer. You just need to be educated around what you need and why you need it and make sure you understand when you may be doing something wrong, when somebody may be doing something wrong to you. And it's that education that's going to benefit you in the long run. So in the membership, I have a ton of education videos like what is trademark infringement, copyright infringement, how exactly does an LLC protect you? What contract provisions are the most important? What can you change? What should you not change in your contracts? So there's a lot that business owners don't understand, and it's perfectly fine. Like you shouldn't understand it unless you went to law school. But most attorneys, in my experience, especially at the big law firms, they want to nickel and dime you for every little thing. And my point of view is, hey, I will teach you everything. I will educate you every last thing you need to know. And then when you need a lawyer, like that's when the law firm is going to make money. Otherwise, like let us just educate you, like arm yourself with the proper tools as a business owner that you need. And then when you need us, we'll still be there.
Yeah, well, that's what I absolutely love about Legalpreneur, and I guess I'm going into, like, 2 years.
Yeah.
It will definitely be sharing in details in the description for this episode, so those of you that are interested. But I think one of the reasons I really wanted you to come on the podcast and chat was just to kinda share some of those kind of early tips, and of course, people can be guided to you. But one of the things that you touched on was kind of like, we don't know what we need. We don't know what we don't know kind of thing.
Exactly.
And I know that there are times, and I may or may not have done this
Yeah.
myself, but
We all have. We all have. It's okay.
but when you're first starting out as a consultant and you're getting your first contract, back in, I started in 2017 And there weren't there were some consultants out there, but public health entrepreneurs wasn't like a big thing. Everybody wasn't proud to say that they were doing that or wanted to do that. And so I was planting the flag there and saying, yes, this is what I'm doing. So when you are looking to get like your first client and you're trying to get a contract together, it was a very common practice for people to just find a contract somewhere online and then revise it and draft their own. And you just kind of roll with it until you can, because everybody, we have lawyers here locally, but it wasn't the expertise that I needed. They didn't really understand what I was doing. So I didn't want to spend a huge retainer to go in and get like one specific contract. And then the next time I had to do something, we'd have to kind of go back and start all over again. So
Exactly.
maybe talk to us a little bit about some of those early watch outs or.
Yeah. So first of all, if you are listening to this and you're like, yeah, like my local attorney has no idea like what I do, you are not alone. I cannot tell you how many clients have come to me after going to who their dad or their uncle referred them to, and that attorney just kind of like stared at them with a blank face or didn't take them seriously. And honestly, we have carved out our own niche here in the online business industry. And working with a lawyer is about feeling heard and seen, number one, but also you don't want to pay them to get them to understand your business. And that's what a lot of hourly attorneys will do, because they charge you hourly to even answer the phone call, draft that email to you. They charge you hourly for every little thing. And so my biggest thing when you're starting out is there's 3 things that you need to legally protect your business when starting out. Every business needs these 3 things. Most businesses will have additional things, but that will be business dependent. So always get started with these 3, and that is your LLC, contracts, and your intellectual property. Now, your LLC, I'm going to give you just like this crash course on legal protection. So your LLC, it's a limited liability company. You want this ASAP, as soon as possible. I have heard a million times from a million different people like, oh, wait until you're making X number of dollars to file the LLC. That is very bad advice and it is wrong. The purpose of an LLC is to limit you as an individual from the debts of your company. Even if you don't, as an individual right now, have assets or you don't have debts in the business, you have to protect yourself now against what you may acquire in the future. If you acquire assets, if you acquire debts, you want that protection now. Because if you wait until you're making a certain dollar amount to file the LLC, and then you blow up overnight, you go viral, now you're making all this money, and then day 3 comes along and you remember, oh, I'm making all this money, let me go file the LLC. And then day 100 comes along and you get sued for what happened on day 1 or day 2 before you were an LLC. Even though you're an LLC at the time of the lawsuit, you were not an LLC the time the act happened. So you do not get the LLC protection. And most likely at the beginning is when you're making the most mistakes. That's when you need the most protection because you're not aware of everything. You don't know what you don't know. The people who I work with, they're not out here maliciously doing things. We just don't know everything, and that's perfectly fine. We just have to take the steps necessary to protect ourselves in case something does happen. So make sure you're filing that LLC as soon as possible. What people are referring to when they are talking about that dollar amount, they are talking about the S Corp election. It's a subchapter S in the IRS code. It is a tax saving strategy. Very useful, very helpful. You cannot make that election until you are making a certain dollar amount, but it is separate from just the LLC. You cannot make that S Corp election until you are either an LLC or a corporation. When an accountant or somebody says, oh, wait till you're making X number of dollars, they're thinking it has to be done at the same time. It does not. You always first want to have the LLC, and then when you're making enough money, you make that S Corp election. So that is LLCs in a nutshell. If somebody tells you to wait until you're making a certain dollar amount, ignore them. They don't know what they're talking about, or they're talking about the S Corp election, not just the LLC. They're 2 different things. Now, for contracts, Rule number one is don't be afraid of them. Don't be afraid to use them. I have run into a number of, especially newer business owners that are like, oh, it's a handshake deal. It's something informal. We don't need to get it in writing. No, that is when you need to get it in writing. And it's nothing more than just laying out the expectations and duties of all the parties to the contract. When you're starting out, it is perfectly fine to get started with contract templates, but make sure they are reliable contract templates. And this is actually the very first product that we did sell under Legalpreneur. So we officially launched the Legalpreneur company in 2020, and we launched it with our contract templates. So we have a contract vault where you can go and buy just certain contract templates that you need. But all of our contract templates, there's over 100. They are all included in our Legalpreneur membership. Pretty much everything under the sun you can think of, it's all included in there. So contracts, don't be afraid to use them. You can start with templates, but make sure they are reliable attorney drafted contract templates. And what I always tell clients, especially if you're new, start with these templates, get exposure in business, learn what you like and don't like in your contracts, and then you'll graduate to a custom contract. And that's exactly how we started the contract vault, because I was helping so many clients in the law firm draft these custom contracts, but they were so new in business, they didn't know what they liked and didn't like in the contract. They didn't know what they wanted versus what they didn't want. And so after basically just giving them my template because they didn't want to make any changes, I realized like, oh, we just need to sell these templates. And then once they get more experience, then they can come and we can create these custom contracts for them or make any changes that they need. So that is how the contract vault started.
That's amazing right there. I'm just going to tell you that. I mean, I'm kind of past it, but I'm reliving those moments, and I'm just imagining my listeners frantically taking notes and going, "Oh, now I get it." And, "Oh, yes, exactly."
Yeah.
This is like gold.
Good. And my favorite, best for last, is intellectual property. So trademarks and copyrights and patents, those are the three arms of intellectual property. I don't handle patents. They're inventions of things. Trademarks and copyrights, that is what I handle. Trademarks are my bread and butter. I'm actually ranked number 22 out of 40,000 trademark attorneys in the United States. So I do know a thing or two when it comes to trademarks. They're my favorite thing to know.
I brag on that about you all the time.
Thank you. When they first started coming out with these rankings, I actually didn't tell anybody for a long time. And I started out as number 27 or 29. And I think after like 6 months, I was like, wait, this is a big deal. This is actually a really big deal because a lot of attorney rankings, you just pay and it's like, oh, top lawyers or best lawyers. But then I realized I was like, no, they actually aggregate all your data, your filings, approvals, everything. I was like, oh, this is a really big deal. Okay, I'm going to brag on this.
Yes.
So don't forget. Yeah, that's a little, just a separate business tip to brag on yourself, because we have to recognize ourselves and how well we have done.
Yes, that's so true.
Now, trademarks and copyrights, they are two of the most misused terms with entrepreneurs, and I want to make sure you do not misuse them. And the easiest way to tell the difference between the two: trademarks equal branding, copyrights equal content. So trademarks are your brand identity, your brand name, your logo, your slogan, a product name, a service name, your podcast name. If it has a unique name, it likely can be protected with a trademark. And then your copyrights are your content. It's the consistent things that you're creating: videos, photos, blog posts, your website copy, your long form social captions, this podcast episode. So usually the name of something is the trademark and what goes inside is the copyright. So this podcast, the name of our podcast is a trademark. Each podcast episode is protected with a copyright. The cool thing about copyrights is you automatically have federal protection the moment the work is created. You don't have to get a registration. Whereas trademarks, you do have to have a federal registration in order to have federal rights. And once you have that federal registration, you do have a lot of power, and especially a lot of power online, because you can actually submit trademark takedowns online to get the trademark infringing work removed. It's not guaranteed that it will get removed, but there's a good chance that it will get removed. This is actually how we got the Legalpreneur Instagram handle, because it was taken and then I got the trademark, and literally within like a day or two, I had the handle. I was like, oh, great. So this does work. So keep in mind, copyrights, you automatically have protection, but you cannot sue unless you do have the registration. Trademarks, you just have to have that registration to even have rights. And my advice is to start the trademark process as soon as possible, because right now it's taking at a minimum 14 months from the date you file your application to the day that you're approved. It is a minimum of 14 months. So if you file your application today, you will not get approved until at least mid 2026.
Yes, I can attest to the long process.
Yeah.
I have one secured already. Exciting. It took us about 12 months, I think. 10 to 12 months. And then I have one that we did last summer, so it's coming soon, hopefully. And then we do have one that was just filed a couple of months ago. So, and I think we were in 14-month window when we started. So yes, definitely a long process, but gosh, I've learned so much since I've been working with you. So in listening to you now, I'm still taking notes on here, but there's so much that is like, really been sinking in over the years. It was very scary at first. Not as scary right now, but probably because I'm kind of locked arms with you. So it's following your lead. So not as scary for those reasons too. So copyright, trademarks, got that. And then you mentioned patents, but you don't deal with patents.
Correct. Yes. And everything that I mentioned, we do cover in the Legalpreneur membership. So in our Legalpreneur membership, we will file your LLC. You just have to pay the government filing fees. You have access to all of our contract templates. We will provide you with the trademark search report. And then you also get access to our DIY trademark course. And you have our bank of training videos. Plus, you also have a business audit. So the business audit is where we go in, dissect everything that you have, and tell you, number one, if you already have an LLC, we'll make sure everything is up to date, everything is good to go. We'll tell you exactly what contracts you need for what offering you have, whether you need a trademark or a copyright on this or that. So we go in and we give you all the answers, and all of that's part of the membership.
Okay, yeah. This is fantastic. I think this is really helpful for just thinking about my audience and thinking about people that I've coached that are getting started and kind of where they are. Took a lot of notes because some of this I can kind of take back to my mastermind group and kind of remind people. And, we may make a separate session on this conversation. I love those 3 things that you shared. Is there anything else that you would add? I mean, this has been very, very helpful and we've kind of covered it all. Is there anything else that we've forgotten? Or maybe I should have asked and didn't know to ask?
No, all I want to share is don't be afraid of the legal stuff. If you wait until you need a lawyer, you've waited too long. And it doesn't have to be scary, especially when you tackle this stuff head on from the beginning. The only time this stuff gets scary is when you wait and you get that dreaded cease and desist letter and you get sued or whatever the issue is. If you wait until there's an issue, that's the problem. But when you set up all these steps up front, likely there's never going to be an issue. But everybody has it built up in their heads because in the news we hear about this $1 billion lawsuit with whoever, so-and-so suing so-and-so. And we build up these legal issues in our head, but it doesn't have to be scary. It doesn't have to be intimidating, especially when we tackle it head on. And that's the goal with Legalpreneur, is just to make sure that every entrepreneur, no matter what stage of business they're in, they have the resources available to them to protect everything they need.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much, Andrea. I
Thank you.
appreciate, you coming on the podcast and sharing so much. And I will make sure that I put together the links so that people can connect with you to learn more and to bring their specific questions or issues to you and see how you could help them too. So thank you so much.
Sounds great. Thank you for having me.
Thank you for listening. Visit publichealthentrepreneurs.com to learn more.